Picked up a couple things from the auto parts store. We're gonna do a little tune-up on this Tacoma here today. First thing on the list here is going to be our Seafoam additive to the fuel tank. If you're putting this in the fuel tank, it says add 1 ounce of Seafoam per gallon of fuel. I've checked it out. I think my tank's between like 16 and 18 gallons, so I'm gonna put this whole thing in here. This is 16 fluid ounces. Got the funnel, gonna pop this in the fuel tank, fill it up with some fresh 93 at a very high premium price, and then we'll head back home and do the rest of the Seafoam treatment with the Seafoam going in the crankcase. We're also gonna put Seafoam through the throttle body and clean the top end of the motor. Then we're going to move on to replacing some stuff on the engine that definitely needs to get replaced, and I'll show you that when we get home. The Tacoma's got a full tank of gas of 93 and an entire can of Seafoam into the fuel system, so that will go ahead and clean the fuel tank, the fuel lines, the injectors. We'll head home now and get started on step 2 of the process. This is what I picked up from the auto parts store. It's a pour and spray combo kit from Seafoam, and I actually also got one more of the pour cans that you saw me put in the fuel tank. So this one here on the left side is going to be going into the crankcase, and this one here on the right is what we spray the entire can into the throttle body. And I just pulled out this little piece of instructions, and it actually recommends to do a full concentration for the fuel tank with 2 ounces for every gallon of fuel. So I guess I went on the lesser side of that concentration, doing only 1 ounce per gallon of fuel, but I guess it says you can do up to 2 ounces of Seafoam per gallon. Regarding the section for the throttle body, this is important. You want to drive the car like I just did, get it nice and warmed up, and then you're gonna basically turn off all the accessories, shut the car off. You're gonna remove the throttle body boot, and I'll show this to you guys, but this can comes with this little spray nozzle here and straw that you stick into the throttle body. You're going to spray the entire can into the throttle body. It takes about 5 minutes or so while you keep some throttle onto the motor to keep it from dying. And then once the can is empty, you're going to shut the motor off, let it heat soak for 10 to 15 minutes, and then go drive spiritedly around to get all that Seafoam out. I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen those videos on YouTube where people Seafoam their cars and trucks and they create plumes of white smoke out the tailpipe. I think it's more just a show factor, but it is supposed to be cleaning out the hydrocarbons in the motor, and that supposedly is what you see coming out. It is what it is, guys. I've heard good stuff, and I've actually had good experience with Seafoam, so I'm gonna try it on this truck. It's got almost 80,000 miles on it now. I'm sure this thing is due for some cleaning internally. I'm hoping the Seafoam will clean up a bunch of the gunk in the motor. With the truck warm now, I'm gonna go ahead and get the throttle body situated and get the straw hooked up, and then we'll start spraying the stuff. If you guys are new here, my name's Connor. This is my 1998 Toyota Tacoma with the 3.4 cylinder. It's a 4x4. My girlfriend and I like to do a lot of truck camping out of it. I take this thing on road trips, do some wheeling in it. So it's good to get it nice and tuned up and cleaned from the inside out. And now we're gonna move on to the throttle body cleaning. On the 5VZ FE 6-cylinder motor here, you're basically going to take off the intake here at the throttle body, and you're going to stick the straw in right through there and keep it about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch away from the throttle body plate. And then that's basically, you're just going to spray that while you're keeping throttle on, which I don't have someone here to hold the throttle for me, so I'm going to try and use the throttle cable here to do that while I'm spraying, and then we will go ahead and shut the motor off and let it heat soak. And before I get started, I'm just now looking at it because I was thinking about this the other day. So I have a deep cycle marine battery that Jen and I use when we're camping and all that for electricity, and the unfortunate thing is it's a flooded battery, so it actually has essentially poisonous off-gassing from it. And we were trying to think of a battery box and a ventilation system to do in the back of the truck camper, and it's just seeming like it would be really difficult. I don't want to drill holes in things, and I'm just noticing now on this engine bay I have a ton of room back in this corner. So I'm wondering if I can create a mounting plate for my marine deep cycle battery, and then I'll just run wiring to the back to the truck camper. But then I can actually do the whole setup where I wire the deep marine cycle battery to the alternator, so that way when I'm driving, it not only recharges my starting battery, but it will also recharge that battery, which will also have solar eventually. I know I'm straying away from the project here, but that just got me excited. I wanted to share that with you guys. Let me know what you think. If you have some recommendations on kits to do that alternator second wiring set to a second battery. Excited about that. I've measured out 5.5 ounces of the porous Seafoam that I'm gonna be putting into the crankcase here. Seafoam calls for 1 ounce for every quart that you put in of oil. So I'm doing, this is about a 5.5 quart motor, so I'm gonna put 5.5 ounces of Seafoam right into the crankcase where I fill up the oil. Instead of doing the spray, I figured I would do this first, just get it out of the way. It's really easy to get done. And then that way when I'm actually using the spray, the stuff that's in the crankcase is already gonna be starting to go to work cleaning the inside of the motor. We've got the Toyota up to operating temperature, so that's what they call for. And now we're gonna go ahead, shut it down. There we go. So the inside actually doesn't look too bad. I'm just inspecting it for carbon buildup, and it really, I mean, there's some, but it's not too bad. It looks like the air filter is doing its job, and there may not be too much going on nasty wise in the motor, but never hurts to do it anyways. So I'm gonna slip the straw in here. Again, get it about this far from the throttle body plate, which is about there. We're gonna reattach this with the straw still in, turn the motor back on, and get to spraying. With the motor running, I'm gonna go ahead and use this to add some power. You want to do about 500 RPMs above your idle. This calls for about 2,000 RPM. So I'm going to be holding it and spraying at the same time. We're now going to let everything sit and heat soak for about 10 to 15 minutes. I used the entire can. And while that's heat soaking, I'll remove the straw and reattach the intake there. There was definitely some smoke already coming out the tailpipe and blowing its way towards me. So hopefully this thing's doing its job and cleaning out the inside. Again, you want to let this sit for a while the motor's already warm, so that way it gets and coats everything inside the motor and starts to break down the carbon deposits. That's the plan. We're going to let this sit for 10 minutes and we're going to turn it back on, see maybe some smoke happen. And then I'm gonna go drive it spiritedly for about 10-15 minutes to get all the Seafoam out of the top end of the motor. Well, the spirited driving is all done. The Tacoma felt about the same, so I don't expect to see like immediate effects. I think the oil additive is actually going to be the thing that I needed the most, as well as the spray. The top end definitely needed to get cleaned out. The fuel system, I add fuel additives. I really like Tecron. That's probably my favorite, but I figured I would just do the full Seafoam treatment today. I'm gonna run the oil additive Seafoam for probably about a tank of gas. It'll probably be close to 300 miles. And then I'm gonna do a fresh oil change with some Lucas additive that I really like to use on every time I do an oil change on this truck. And then, you know, we'll see what comes out. I think the oil, I checked it before I added the Seafoam, and it looked pretty clean actually. Even though it's the end of my oil change, I'm at the point where I need to do an oil change. The fluid, the oil still looked really good. So what I'm hoping is in 300 miles when I go to do the oil change, all that grime and stuff that's in the motor, the Seafoam's gonna loosen it off and put it into the oil. And then when I do the oil change, I'm hoping that oil is much darker and blacker because it's basically filled with all the stuff that the Seafoam cleaned. However, we are not done on this Tacoma yet today. We need to replace some vacuum lines because there was one I saw, I'm like, that's got to get replaced. And then as I was sizing it up, I was looking at the other vacuum lines and noticing they all have hairline cracks, big cracks in them. So I'm sure this thing's got a vacuum leak. I'm gonna try and replace as many of them as I can today. I bought 3 feet of 2 different sizes of vacuum line. I'm gonna see how far that gets me, and I'm gonna mark off the ones that I've already done with probably some tape, so that way when I go and get more vacuum line, I can clearly see which ones still need to be replaced, and we'll just keep going until they're all done and the vacuum system is tidied up. Back on the 3.4 liter, this was the hose that I saw first. I was like, wow, that needs to get replaced. So I pulled it off. I was like, I'm gonna bring this inside the auto parts store, match it up to some other hose and see if I can get it replaced. And then I started looking around. I noticed this hose down here is cracked. This long one that runs all the way across the motor should get replaced. It's showing signs of like dry rot and it feels hard to the touch, which they shouldn't. This one up here, also massive crack, needs to get replaced. I'm just gonna kind of work as I can, and I bought 3 feet of 2 different sizes of vacuum line. I'm gonna see how far that gets me, and the ones that are still original that I need to replace, I'm gonna wrap in some electrical tape so that way I can kind of mark it and make sure I know that one still needs to get done. First things first, let's get this one off. Just pull that out and we'll get it off of this side. Now I'm gonna do this one by one so that way I'd never have to worry about where it goes back. You know, don't take them all off at once, so that way you have no idea how to put it back together. I'm gonna do this one by one, and we'll just see how far that 6 feet of vacuum line gets us. Definitely didn't give me the cleanest cut. Might use a knife next. Okay, so here I've got our new piece of line cut. Put this side on there, and this side onto this side. Here is why you should always keep old clamps and things. So I've got a bunch of different styles. I'm gonna go ahead and find one that kind of suits up to that smaller end there and see which one of these is gonna be the winner. It's not my favorite style of clamp, but it will have to do. It was the only one I could get small enough to still grip it. So we're gonna move on to the next one. Here are all the old hoses that I was able to swap out, so got quite a number of them done. And this is how the 3.4 liter sounds warmed up after being treated with the Seafoam. Here is idle. So that's gonna do it for today. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel. If you enjoyed this one, give it a thumbs up. Comments below if you have any suggestions or videos you wanna see. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. At least consider it. You don't have to. You can subscribe. If you don't like it, unsubscribe later. But for all of you, thank you so much for watching. I will see you next time. Adios. Keep elevating.